In this video, we're going to look at how the nav drawer interacts with toolbars. So basically, we're going to go ahead and remove the action bar from the project and replace it with the toolbar, and then we're going to hook it up to the nav drawer so it behaves in the way that we expect it to. So let's go ahead and get started. I guess the first thing we need to do is make the actual toolbar that we're going to be using. Now, since we have two activities and we're going to be using the toolbar in both activities, I'm going to go ahead and make an include file that will print out the action bar exactly how I want it to be. So coming over here into my layout folder, I'm going to right click, select new, go to layout resource file. Once I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a include underscore, and I guess we can go ahead and call this just toolbar. So there's a couple interesting things about this include file. First of all, we are going to be replacing the entire linear layout with the toolbar. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a self-closing tag. Then I'm going to remove the orientation, because orientation isn't a property that the toolbar is going to recognize. Then I'm going to replace linear layout with android.support.v7.widget.toolbar. So now the entirety of this XML file is the toolbar. Let's also change its height to wrap content, and let's change a couple other things. I want to go ahead and give it a background of an ATTR color primary. Again, we talked about this in our toolbar video, but the question mark ATTR syntax allows us to access theme properties. And we can go ahead and replace the theme, or set that theme property ourselves here momentarily. The color primary, that is, because currently it's undefined. The next thing I want to do is, because my color primary is going to be dark, I want to go ahead and make sure that the theme of this toolbar is also a dark theme so that the text appears black instead of white. To do that, I'm going to say app::theme, and I'm going to reference a style. I'm going to say @style to reference the style resource, theme overlay .appcompat.dark.actionbar. Now all that's left is for me to go ahead and import the app XML namespace, and I can do that quite easily by hitting Alt-Enter. Now you see at the top the XMLNS app has appeared next to the XMLNS Android. Now that we have that done, we definitely have to go ahead and set our color primary to something, because right now it's just this black undefined. I don't even know what once we launch it what the color would be. Probably black, because it would probably take it from this theme. Regardless, we won't control over that, so we want to make sure that we set this theme property. And again, to do that, just like what we did before, we're going to locate our styles.xml file under our values resource folder. Opening up styles, we have our app theme, and we can go ahead and add a new property. So I'm going to say item, and I'm going to give it a name of color primary. Again, I'm not going to prefix it with Android : because we're doing this at the app compat level, at the support library level, and not the Android SDK level. So let's go ahead and give it a color, and this color I'm going to give it is the nice little dark blue color that I like so much, and that's going to be 2196F3 is what it is. And that is going to be our color primary. Now if we go back to our include toolbar, you see that it's updated to use our nice blue. Okay, now that we have our toolbar, let's go ahead and include it in both of our activities that we have. So let's close out of these two files, these two XML files, and let's locate our first activity that I want to include the toolbar, and that is an activity address book, or activity address book, with the emphasis on the wrong word there, apparently. And what I want to do is I want to include the toolbar at the top of our relative layout. So to do that, I simply say include space layout equals include toolbar. Now by doing that, we have our toolbar up at the top of the file, or up at the top. Now you notice that our toolbar is having this this padding attached to it, because the relative layout has this padding of 16 dp. Let's go ahead and remove that padding. So I'm going to delete that padding so that the toolbar is flush with the top of the application, making it appear pretty much exactly like an action bar. Now let's go into our activity inbox and do the same thing. I'll go ahead and I'll remove the padding first, preemptively, and then I'm going to go in with an include, and I'm going to say include layout, include toolbar, just like what we did before, and it's right above that text view. Of course, this being a relative layout, it's going to default to being at the top of the file, or at the top of the layout, rather. Next up, I want to do something really quick that I forgot to do. Now, our toolbar isn't really functional at this point. In fact, our toolbar will do nothing. We haven't told Android that we want to use our toolbar as our action bar yet. However, to do that, we need a reference to our toolbar. And how do we get a reference to our toolbar? We need to reference it by ID. Well, unfortunately, I totally forgot to actually give it an ID, so let's go ahead and fix that real fast. Let's go into our toolbar and our toolbar include file. I did that, by the way, by just holding down Control and clicking on this. You can also middle mouse click on it if you want, or hold down Control and click on it. Let's give it an ID of plus ID slash, I don't know, let's just say include toolbar, so that we have an ID that we can reference in our base activity, and that'll correctly identify the toolbar in both files, because they're both originating from the same include file. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and make one more change to both our activity inbox and our activity address book. And that is, now that we have our toolbar, and our toolbar has an ID, we also need to be able to reference the drawer layout by ID. We actually need to get a reference to this object in our Java code in order to hook our toolbar into this drawer layout. So in order for the toolbar, when you click on the icon for the drawer layout to open and for the drawer layout to close, we need to make sure that we can get a reference to it. And to do that, now remember, address book activity and inbox activity both inherit from base activity. So I want to make sure that the ID of this drawer layout is the same in both activity inbox and activity toolbar or activity address book, so that I can use the same code to hook up both of their drawer layouts to both of their toolbars. So to do that, I'm going to go in here on activity inbox and give our drawer layout an ID. I'm simply going to say plus ID slash, and I'm going to say drawer layout. All right. So then I'm going to come over here to include address book, and I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to be very careful to have the same ID. In fact, I can go ahead and copy and paste the ID, the drawer layout. It's very important that both of these drawer layouts have the same ID so that the base activity can reference them with the same code. If they differed in a layout, then, or different in ID, then our base layout our base activity might fail when we try to create our address book activity, but succeed when we try to make our inbox activity. So we've got to make sure that they're the same ID. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can go in our base activity and we can start working with our nav drawer. So what I'm going to do here is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get a reference to both my nav drawer and my toolbar, and then I'm going to set my toolbar up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark our nav drawer as final, and you'll see why here in a second. So I'm going to say drawer layout, and I'm going to go ahead and call this drawer layout, and I'm going to say equals drawer layout find view by ID, our ID drawer layout. So that gets a reference to our drawer layout. Now the reason I'm marking this as final is because there are going to be some closures that I need to be able to access this from. Okay, now let's go ahead and get our toolbar. So to get our toolbar, I'm simply going to say toolbar, and make sure that I'm selecting support v7 widget toolbar and not Android widget toolbar. Toolbar equals cast to toolbar, find view by ID, r.id, include toolbar. So now that I have a reference to both my drawer layout and my toolbar, I can start doing some fun stuff. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say set support action bar and set it to toolbar. Now remember what this does. This basically makes it so our action bar is now considered to be our toolbar. So all of our option menu items are going to appear on our toolbar instead of our action bar. Now that that's done, I want to go ahead and I want to make sure there's an icon. I want there to be the hamburger icon in our activity toolbar so that when you click on it, the nav drawer pops out. Now, we don't have a hamburger handy right now in our drawable folder, so I'm going to sub an icon in that we have. Remember how I'm using this IC launcher kind of as our placeholder icon? You can go off and download some free hamburger icons if you want from Google. It's called IC_drawer. and we'll be doing that later. But in this video, in the interest of time, I'm just going to go ahead and use the IC launcher as the button on our toolbar that expands our nav layout. It'll be ugly, but it'll be functional. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say toolbar dot set navigation icon, and I'm going to set it to r.mitmap.icLauncher. Okay, so that'll make a button appear on our toolbar that we can click, and it'll be that particular drawable. However, we haven't yet instructed our toolbar to open up our drawer layout when you click that button. None of the behavior of that button has been specified yet. To specify that behavior, I'm simply going to do toolbar.setNavigationOnClickListener, and I'm going to instantiate a new anonymous inner class that inherits, or implements rather, onClickListener. And by doing that, it generated that code for me. So all this does is generates an anonymous inner class. And inside of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if drawer layout dot is drawer open gravity start, then drawer layout close drawer gravity dot start. Else drawer layout dot open drawer gravity dot start. So now we've hooked up our nav drawer, or our drawer layout rather, to our toolbar. Let's go ahead and see how that looks right now before we move on. So we have Android 4 and Android 5. Unfortunately, we got an error. Probably did something dumb somewhere. So let's go ahead and see what I did wrong. That was a good catch on the part of AppConpat. Can you guys think of what I might have did wrong? I forgot to actually remove the action bar from our window decor. So let's go ahead and do that first. Because remember, we're replacing it with the toolbar. So I'm going to open up values, styles.xml, and I'm going to come here and locate my app theme, and I'm going to replace the parent with light.noActionBar. And that'll remove the action bar, which will allow us to replace the functionality of the action bar with our new toolbar. So let's go ahead and hit play. And I'll bring these windows over here. All right, so now we see that indeed our action bar was replaced by our toolbar. We see it up there. And now if I click on this button, check that out. Now if I click on inbox, we get our inbox. If I click on address book, we get our address book activity. And I'm able to click on this icon and have the nav drawer pop out. So now imagine instead of this icon being the IC launcher, instead it's a hamburger. And that's the classic menu icon, the classic 3 stripes that indicate a menu that you can click on and expand. Anyway, if we had time, we would do that as well. You guys can go find the free icon pack provided by Google and import those manually yourself and get that effect. However, the logic would remain the exact same. Another thing we can do is we can make our clicking a little bit better on our nav drawer, address book, logout, and inbox by having it, whenever you click on an item in the nav drawer, having it close the nav drawer. So I'm going to say drawer layout dot close drawer gravity start. And I'm going to do that on all 3 of our buttons. So now when I hit play, well, it'll look a little bit better when we click on it. We'll have an instant feedback that we're closing that drawer. So when I hit inbox, you can kind of just barely see that it's retracting as you click on it. And I think that looks a whole lot better. Especially if you guys are watching this at a higher frames per second, which I don't capture at a particularly high frame per second for these videos, so you might not see that effect. Again, there's a couple other improvements we can make. We can definitely fix the animations on the activities, but I'm not too concerned about that because we'll be definitely taking a look at that when we start the app. Okay, so the next thing I really want to work on is managing buttons, or rather allowing our nav bar to not go over our toolbar. Now, it's really a stylistic sort of thing. In the app that we're going to put together, I'm not going to have the nav bar. I'm going to have the nav bar, or the nav drawer rather, appear over the toolbar as you see right here. But some other applications, they like their toolbar to remain still visible and still functional when the toolbar or when the nav drawer is open. So just because that's such a common thing, I want to go ahead and show you guys how to do it. And I also want to point out some design guidelines that you'll have with the nav drawer if you decide to go this route, and how to fix it. So you guys are going to be able to see some really fun options created and invalidated stuff. It won't take a whole lot of time to do, so I'll go ahead and roll this into this one video. So first thing I want to do is I want to go into my activity inbox. So just on my activity inbox, I'll go ahead and set up my my toolbar so that it appears above the nav drawer when the nav drawer is open. I'm not going to worry about doing the same thing in my address book because you guys could reuse this same concept. Basically, what I need to do is I need to move this view group, this drawer layout, out of being the parent of everything and into being a child view of another view group. So one way to do that would be to just wrap this entire thing with a new view group that I want it to be. So the new view group that I want to have above the drawer layout is a linear layout. Now, since I'm creating a top level view here up at linear layout, I'm typing out linear layout up here, that's going to wrap everything. Since I'm creating a top level view group, I definitely want to take these XML namespace declarations and move them up. I want to move them up out of the drawer layout and into the linear layout. Then I want to give my linear layout its required properties. So for example, height, layout height is match parent, and layout width is match parent. Then I want to make sure to give it the orientation of vertical, and then I want to close it off. Now that I've closed this off, I'm going to take this end tag, and I'm going to cut it by hitting Control-C, and I'm going to paste it all the way at the bottom of the file. And then I'm going to fix my indentation. So now effectively what I've done is I've taken this drawer layout and I've nested a linear layout in it. Really the most important thing that I did was I moved the XML namespace attributes from the drawer layout into the now parent view group, the linear layout. Now that I've done that, I can take this include toolbar and I can cut it by hitting Control-C. I can select this and cut it, and I can paste it above the drawer layout. So now, instead of the toolbar being a child of the relative layout, which constitutes the rest of the content of my activity, it is now a sibling to the drawer layout. And as you'll see in a moment, this will allow the toolbar to be accessible, to remain accessible while the toolbar or while the nav drawer is still open. So let's go ahead and hit play and see that behavior. So now when I open my nav drawer, check that out. When I'm on my inbox, it's underneath my toolbar. But when I'm in my address book, it's above my toolbar. So now you can see an example of both instances of it being used, like that. However, there's a design guideline here. If you actually go and actually read the design guidelines, which I recommend you guys do, especially the material design guidelines, it says that if you decide to have your action bar or your toolbar visible while your nav drawer is open, then you want to show and hide elements on your action bar depending on what they are and what they do. So if you have contextual items on your action bar, such as insert item or refresh page or delete thing, which are contextual and have to do with the content of the activity, the Android design guidelines specify that you should have those items be removed when the nav drawer is open, and then add them back when the nav drawer is closed. In this case, however, I don't need to worry about it because the only thing I have right here is settings. And the settings option is a really global sort of menu item that doesn't need to be removed when the navigation drawer is open. However, just because it demonstrates a nice little additional use of groups in menus and additional features, I want to go ahead and show you guys a really convenient way that I can go about having menu items being shown and hidden depending on if the action bar is open. Or rather, the navigation drawer. So let's go ahead and do that real fast. It's not going to take a whole lot of time. Let's go ahead and jump into our base activity. Again, we're doing all this functionality from within our base activity so that this functionality is available on both our inbox activity and our address book activity. Now, there's going to be 3 steps. The first step is this drawer layout. I'm just going to work top to bottom here. The drawer layout is going to have to turn into a field. It can no longer be a local variable because I'm going to introduce another method in this class that's going to have to reference our drawer layout. So instead of repeating the findViewById that I do here, instead of doing that, I'm going to alias out our drawer layout into a field so I can access it from multiple methods. Now, to do that, it's really straightforward. We right-click drawer layout. We open up the refactor menu. Now, the refactor menu is so large that it's actually appearing off my screen, but it is there. It's on my screen above. And I'm going to select the extract submenu, and I'm going to select field. You could also hit Control, Alt, and F. Clicking on field, I'm going to go ahead and keep everything as it is and hit enter. And now our drawer layout has been factored out into a field, or refactored into a field. So now we can access this from multiple methods. Now the second step is every time the action bars or the navigation drawer is opened or closed, I want to inform the activity that its options menu has been invalidated. So our options menu in our action bar has this concept of being invalidated, which means that, well, it's invalidated. Some external condition has changed in such a way that the options menu needs to be recalculated. So that gives me a perfect opportunity to show and hide items on my toolbar depending on if the navigation bar is open or closed. However, I need to actually write some code in here that will tell my activity that the options menu has been invalidated when the drawer opens and closes. To do that is really simple. I'm going to do this all the way at the bottom of my onCreate method. See? I'm in my onPostCreate method, sorry. I'm going to do drawer layout dot set drawer listener. Hit enter, and then I'm going to instantiate a new drawer listener, and hit enter again so that I get all this code generated. So a drawer listener is simply an interface that receives these method calls whenever something happens, whenever the drawer is opened, whenever the drawer is closed, and when the drawer is being slid. There's also this onDrawer state change, which I'm going to take advantage of. The state change will allow me to know when the drawer has finally settled and is now idle. The reason for that is when you do an onOptions item, when you invalidate your options menu, it might take a couple milliseconds to run. It probably won't, but it could potentially take some time to run. If you do that while your drawer is being opened or closed, you can get some stuttering in the animation. So Google recommends that you only change your options menu when you have switched back into state idle. However, that means I have to keep track of whether or not my drawer has been opened or closed so that when we switch into idle, I can check that flag and then invoke the invalidation of our options menu depending on if the drawer is opened or closed. So to accomplish that, I need to make sure that I have a private boolean. So I'm going to say private boolean should invalidate options menu. So now you see in this course, if you haven't done a whole lot of Java and you're still kind of iffy about these anonymous inner classes, here is the first time in this video series that I've actually created a private field inside of an anonymous inner class. This private field behaves exactly like you would expect it to. It behaves how a private field would behave in the parent class, for example. But make sure that you put your private boolean should invalidate options menu inside of the anonymous inner class, which means it's inside of one of these curlies, but outside these methods. So now what I'm going to do is on drawer opened, I'm going to say should invalidate options menu equals true. On drawer closed, should invalidate options menu equals true. Then on state changed, I'm going to change this parameter to new state to make it a little bit more descriptive. And I'm going to say if new state equals drawer layout dot state idle and should invalidate options menu. Then what should we do? Well, we should invalidate options menu and set should invalidate options menu back to false, so it doesn't invalidate the options menu again if we ever return to idle, but our drawer was never opened or closed. So the invalidate options menu is a method that comes from our activity, and again, it'll recreate the options menu. So now I'm going to create another callback. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an override. Now I'm doing this on my activity class. I'm not doing this on my anonymous inner class. So I'm doing override public boolean on prepare. That's not how you spell boolean. On prepare options menu. So then finally at the end I'm going to say return super.onPrepare. Make sure I call back to my base class. Okay, so what do I want to do here? Well, here's where I can show and hide all my items that I want to, depending on if my options menu or my my drawer layout is opened or closed. And really easy way to do this is to take advantage of menu groups. So what I can do here is I can disable or enable an entire group of menu items depending on if my drawer is open. However, this introduces a problem. What if I don't have any menu groups that have an ID that I want to open or close? Why would that be a problem? Well, I can go ahead and I can say menu.setGroupVisible, and I can go ahead and pass in the first argument, which I don't know yet, but my second argument is going to be not drawer layout dot is drawer open gravity start. So what I'm doing is if our drawer is open, then it'll return false. If our drawer is closed, then it'll return true. So this group will be hidden when the drawer is open and shown when the drawer is closed. However, I have a problem here. What do I put in those question marks? What ID can I put in here that I haven't created a group ID yet in any of my menu resources? I don't know if I will have any groups that have that particular behavior. I don't know if I have a single group in a particular activity that will be shown or hidden. So I want to use an ID that's already established in my application that a menu can choose to expose or not expose depending on depending on the activity itself. So what I can do is I'm going to reuse an ID. I'm going to say r.id.drawerLayout. So if you have a group called drawer layout, it'll be hidden when the drawer is open and shown when the drawer is closed, but you're not required to. That's the cool thing about the way I'm doing this. You're not required to create that group. If you want to create that group in your menu, you can. If you don't have to. So now let's test that. I'm going to go into our menu, and I'm going to open up menu inbox, and I'm going to create a group. And the group is going to have an ID of... Oh, come on. What are you doing? Stop that. ID of... Oh, I already forgot what ID I used. Drawer layout. And I'm going to go ahead and put in some items. Let's put an item with the title of Hide Me, with a app show as action to always. And then I'll do another item with the title of Hide Me 2, with an app show as action equals never. So these two should be hidden when the nav drawer is open and shown when the nav drawer is closed. So now we can hit play, and let's go ahead and check out this behavior on both Lollipop and KitKat simultaneously. So now we see Hide Me up here, and we see Hide Me 2 up there. But when we open the navigation bar, check that out. When the nav drawer is open, those two items disappear. When it's closed, they reappear. When it's open, they disappear. So, yeah, that's nav drawers. A couple other points to talk about. Again, I highly encourage people to go and read the nav drawer design guidelines. They're not that long, and you guys will have a better idea based on what you want to use it for, what you think you may want to use it for when you read over them. So I'm not going to sit here and repeat basically documentation line by line, because that would be a waste of time. However, I do also want to point out that you can have two nav drawers if you want to. You can have a nav drawer that slides in from the right. Notice how on virtually all of the things that we do with the nav drawer, we have to specify a gravity. Like, for example, in our activity inbox, or sorry, in our include nav drawer, we have to specify a gravity right here to gravity start to indicate that it's to the left instead of the right. And also inside of our base activity, notice how we are referencing on our is drawer open, we're referencing gravity start. When we open and close the drawer, we reference gravity start. Basically, if you wanted to have an active or a nav drawer that appears on the right hand side, you would change that to gravity end or gravity right, depending on if you're targeting Android 4.2 or lower. Anyway, I think that pretty much wraps up nav drawers. We pretty much have all of the individual components I want to talk about out of the way to create our top level navigation hierarchy in the app. So in the next video, we're going to switch back over to the app and we're going to incorporate toolbars and nav drawers. And we're also going to create a super awesome flexible nav drawer sort of abstraction that'll make it really easy to add and remove items from our nav drawer. That will make it so we don't have to do things like come in here and manually create buttons all the time, because that's just annoying. Anyway, I guess we'll see you guys in the next video.